you end up having, like, is your level of demand higher than a normal in-house person, or is it different in some way?
So I mean, I don't only do the recruitment, right? And I think we might explain a little bit more, like the my part and everything. But is the demand higher only on the recruitment side? In a way, probably yes, because if you've just invested and then you have the portfolio companies, normally the moment they get cash, they hire more. Those things are very much correlated, right? So depending if they have somebody in house that can help and support on this, or if they completely rely on you, and I don't think that would be healthy, to be honest. And there's probably more of a need for quality in terms of the performance, because you will be very quickly judged on wrong hire, more than I think if you were in-house.
Yeah, I think so.
You're expected to be even better than the in-house one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's actually a very interesting dynamic. So your relationship with existing in-house resources within the portfolio business, you can't be the junior partner there, right? It's not possible for you to do that because you're coming from the investor side.
Exactly.
Very, very interesting. Anyway, welcome everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live on Air, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. And today we're going to do a show which I've been very excited to do. I don't think we've ever done it, but I've been keen to do this ever since the emergence of this particular role a couple of years ago. It seemed to be only a couple of years ago where we started to see recruiters being hired by venture capitalist firms to be like kind of a recruiter in residence, and then working across the portfolio to support those companies that they've invested in. And I think there's basically a micro community of recruiters that operate in this space that I don't think, we don't know anything about, but also I don't think they talk to each other too much. So it'd be very interesting to bring a few of those guys together and have a chat. One of those guys has actually been enrolled into becoming the co-pilot of the show. It's Nico blier-silvistri. Nico, good to see you, man. Obviously you're enjoying life. I can see the blue skies and the pink flowers. All the color scheme suits you very well. And yeah, nice to see you. Nice to have you on the show, bro.
Thanks for having me. Can you please mute yourself? We can hear the wind. I can, but then I cannot talk. So I think it's kind of like counterproductive. And stopping the wind in Copenhagen is just like not going to happen. But if it's really shit, please write it and I'll just go inside. I just wanted to enjoy a little bit of sun and have my beautiful bald head, tan. I need this. This is important for me. But thanks for having me. Always happy to come and chat on Brainfood with you, Hung. I think it's the second time I'm co-hosting, and I think it's the third time I'm attending. So it's super cool.
There's it. Fantastic. We have to make it at minimum an annual thing for you, Nico. So folks, as we go through, let me just make sure everyone can hear us okay. I think Crowdcast, everyone can hear the wind. So that means that the audio at least is okay for you guys in the sense that you can hear it from a technical point of view. That's all well and good. We are live streaming, multi-streaming it everywhere. So this should be going out on LinkedIn, my LinkedIn. It should be going out Rob Walker's LinkedIn. It should be going out on the Starred Company page. Also, if you're watching it, no matter where you're at in any of those places and you can hear me okay, do let me know in the comments below. I'm just checking my phone whether it's going live all right. I think it is, and we should be good. So yeah, just let me know whether the audio is fine. That's important. Nico's going to mute himself because
can you hear the wind?
It's annoying. I agree.
I go in. I can go in.
No. What it is, when you're not talking, mute yourself. That probably is the right thing. But that's okay. All right. So I think people can hear me. That's all fine. Thank you, Jan. That's great stuff. Let's talk about firstly, let's thank our sponsors. As always, folks, we have to thank the sponsors of this show. Brainfood Live is supported every week by a cool, innovative company that is basically saying, you know what, we want this show to continue. I want us to support this live stream. And this week we have our very good friends, Starred, coming out of the Netherlands. And why don't I bring on the CEO of Starred? Because he's going to come on and say hello, give us a few words also. Let's see if he's there and appropriately attired in swag. Any of these sponsors that come on that are failing to wear the t-shirt, I mean, come on, mate. Germany marketing, get on
This
the
is the
case.
opportunity. You need like almost like a tattoo or something like to look.
I was gonna say,
branded.
like, where is the AI tattoo on someone's forehead, so that it's like really in your face. Lars is not gonna let us down. There he is. I knew it. Lars will not let anybody down. There he is with a wonderful starred livery. By the way, one of the good things about your brand, Lars, is that the font size is huge, and I like that. Because you're not shy about it. It's like in your face. It's not one of these like small fonts and that people got to scrutinize. No, it's right there. So Lars, listen, great to see you. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself and start? Like, what is it? Who should care about it? What does it do?
Yeah, thanks, Hang, for having me and having us. Yeah, I'm Lars. I'm the founder and CEO of Start. Yeah, we're the leader in recruitment analytics with a specialization in candidate experience, but also robust functionality when it comes to hiring manager satisfaction and quality of hire. So we do that for the Fortune 500 and the Future 500, as we like to say. So on the one hand, we work for companies like Diageo, Hilton, Coca-Cola, but also for Dropbox, for Twilio, yeah, for the big tech companies.
Cool. How does it work, Lars? You might as well tell us. So basically, I'm a recruiter. I would want this for. How do I deploy it? How does it work? Sort of, if I decide, okay, I'm buying the thing, man.
Yeah. Then, as a recruiter with most solutions, you have to go to your tech department and ask for resources to do the integration. Well, that's already done. So within 5 minutes, you're integrated with your greenhouse, your lever, your whatever. And from that moment onwards, it's super easy. Once you hire or most predominantly reject a candidate, after a couple of days, we will gather the feedback, and we can show for every recruiter, every department, every hiring manager what they should do differently tomorrow to improve the candidate experience.
Yeah, cool. So it's about basically collecting additional information from the candidate side that previously we don't actually collect at all. Because we process so many candidates, we only focus on the one person that gets the job, let's say, and even then we don't do a great job there. Let's say there's 100 candidates in the pipeline. What we can do with Start is that we can delegate that information collection to you guys, and you can give us back some reporting and information that we can use to get better.
Absolutely. And why is it important? On the one hand, when you have great candidates in your pipeline, you don't want them to run away. So therefore, you need a great candidate experience. And in many cases, when your candidate is also your client, if you treat them the wrong way, they won't buy your product in the future.
Yeah, very, very important. Very good. And I think even more so these days, even though the issue of shifting to remote has changed in terms of its prominence in the discourse, but people moving remotely and doing a more remote kind of experience overall, that kind of gives us less visibility as to how they feel about things. If we just rewind back in time, only 2-3 years or so ago, where every experience was predominantly in person, the recruiter would get a gauge as to how that candidate felt because we've seen them coming through the process. But now it's all Zoomed, it's all like online, etc. Like, how do we know? Something like Start, I think, comes into even greater prominence with a more distributed, stroke flexible kind of workforce, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And back in the days, as a manager, you had all your recruiters in one room, so you could also overhear certain conversations. Now you're left in the dark. So we say Start is where opinions become data. So it's actually also to help recruiters to show that they're doing a great job also when working remotely.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Yeah, staying visible with it. Lars, listen, I hear a lot of great things about the product. I mean, that's not a lie. People do like randomly drop it in and say, yeah, I really like this product. So you're doing great over there. Good luck with what you're doing. Thanks for supporting what we're doing here at Brainfood. Keep staying with us for the rest of the show. It's going to be very exciting. We're going to be speaking to VC recruiters. And look forward to your contributions on the comments and your opinions there, Lars. Thanks for joining us, man. What the
Someone
heck?
is muting the lights here, so I think that's my cue.
I tell you what, that's the most dramatic exit I've ever seen. It's like literally.
We can still see the logo we could still see the logo, and it was very cool.
I tell you what, the logo is even kudos to the designer. The logo even is glowing in dark light. It's absolutely amazing.
Very, very cool.
Okay, Lars, great to see you. But it's obviously a motion camera. You need to do some exercising if you're sitting down doing like a too long a monologue. But great.
Okay.
No worries. Take care, Lars. See you later, man.
See you later. Bye-bye.
That's very funny. A good guy. I remember being in a situation like this, doing Brainfood Lab actually, and it was in an office I didn't. I forget the name of the company. Personio, I think it was, out in Barcelona, and it was a motion sensor thing. It was put me into darkness, and I had to get up, do a couple of jumping jacks to reactivate the light. Craziness. Okay, let's quickly review the newsletter, Nico, before we get through. Did you read the newsletter from last week? If so, what was interesting, man?
I did. So like I highlighted three. There was a lot of interesting stuff, and it's all the time you make it so difficult when you're like, oh, you need to choose 2 or 3, and you're like, yeah, but I mean they're kind of like all interesting, which I guess is the concept of recruitment brain food. But the 3 that I highlighted for me that I thought were super interesting in no specific order. I really liked the little video about the Zapier integration, and it's making me rethink the whole, because I mean for years we've said like, you know, all recruiters are going to disappear, oh, let's kill recruitment and everything, and we won't disappear because it's still a business of people talking to people. But that little video made me reflect on, you know, when I worked at Unity or at Revolut, and we had so many recruitment coordinators, and I'm like, yeah, they are in danger. Those are the people that are in danger. So I thought it was super interesting.
Just on that note, people should check this out. It's from a guy called Ewan Cameron, who actually is another good friend of Brainfood's, a CEO of Willow Video Tech kind of business. But he's basically doing a series of how he is personally automating his own sort of workflow, and it's directly applicable to what we do in recruiting. Doing stuff like accessing Zapier's API integration, and then a sort of OpenAI integration, and then basically being able to create automated email responses to any applicant coming through, and then chaining that to event triggers to hiring managers to review candidates, for instance. And you can imagine if you're a human being sitting in the middle of that, moving things backwards and forwards, that's going to take you a huge amount of work. So yeah, tremendously interesting. And what I like about what Ewan did there was simply he recorded looms on it. And I understand he's going to do a series of looms on this. So you might just want to follow Ewan on that. Ewan Cameron, I've just shared the link in the chat stream. Go ahead and check that out. Really, really interesting. Okay.
I thought that was cool. So easy as well. I mean, like it looked like boom, look, done. Like super cool.
What
number 2? Yeah,
go ahead. On that thing, the magic of that is that he's using natural language to instruct the thing. So previously with workflow management tools, you need to figure out, you know, what to do, recipe, etc. He just typed it into the inbox saying, I want you to send a personalized email to every candidate that applies. And then I want every candidate that responds back to then create this trigger for the hiring manager to then look at the candidate. And I was like, all right, that was literally written in natural language. You don't need skills to do this anymore.
That's the stuff. That's the beauty of it.
No skill required. Brilliant. Okay, give me one more.
The second one I really liked was the Reforge article on the fractional C-level. It's something I've been, so like a few reasons for this. It's something that even us, we've been discussing a lot about the future of work. Is the future of work going around a little bit like what you see in football players, you know, like you send them on loan for like 6 months or 12 months, but they're still owned by a club, but they go and learn stuff and then they come back. We were discussing so much this with people in the industry for so long. And what you see here is basically like a CTO for hire, like, you know, like fractionally working for some organizations and everything. And it's not consulting and it's not advising. It is they actually have the job with the responsibilities and everything. And then I saw that Dorian Kendall, who I worked with at Unity, who literally had dinner here in this house with his husband and his kids, playing with my kids, was actually in the article. And I'm not surprised, because I don't think, it makes you think, but I don't think that is for everyone. I think you need to be a specific type of person with a specific type of skills and everything. And you need to be a specific type of organization that is fine with this and not like, okay, it's everything or I take nothing. It was super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, it is fractional workers, folks. Have you heard of this term? Are you a fractional worker yourself? Anyway, the Reforge post there has basically created as describing what it is, and it is different from being a freelancer. It is different from being a consultant or an interim. It's basically an individual that is kind of working fully in the job, but not all the time. And if you think about certain job roles, they actually might lend themselves more naturally to being a fractional type of position. For instance, a CFO, I think, is fundamentally a fractional role, because is a CFO sitting in an office anywhere doing 40 hours worth of CFOing
It depends
for a week?
when. Like it depends
Yeah.
when on the stage of a company. You know what I mean? It's yeah.
But
Super
the
interesting.
value there is the company needs to have a resource on demand. Therefore, you employ the person, but you don't necessarily need that person being there all the time, because there's a lot of stuff that person's there for domain knowledge, for recommendation, for final decision making on various things. That person probably should be fractional. So yeah, very, very interesting. Definitely a part of the future of work.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
exactly. I was super interested. And the last one, super fast. You can't really. It's impossible not to talk about AI at the moment. It's in our face all the time, and I really much tried not to like, oh, let's bring something on AI and everything, because I'm kind of like getting fed up with it. I was getting fed up with NFT and Web3. No, because it's like you just fucking throw it everywhere. It's like, oh yeah, this, and I'm like. And as you can imagine, in the VC, you like all the time, like, hey, we do AI, and you're like, well, do you actually do AI, or is it just you using again beautiful branding and everything? But the article around we're gonna need a bigger moat, and the whole like the ex-Google guy, the godfather of AI, you know, beautiful dramatic words around like we're building Skynet and we're all gonna die. It's obviously is it the flavor of the month? Is it the reality? It's a good article, I think, and it goes super deep into it. So I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I put it down as a must read, and it is a little bit outside of our comfort zone because it is directed towards technical people. But Steve Yeager has the ability, he's an amazing writer. I mean, he's obviously a very prominent software engineer and a prominent person in that field, but somehow he's been able to be equally prominent in the writing space. It's not his only brilliant blog, by the way. He fundamentally is a superb writer. But he's written a blog post which basically gives you his opinion, but also gives you a history of how we've got here in terms of AI. And anybody who wants to have a bit of depth to it, I think beyond just the consumer usage of the tooling, if you want to know sort of all of the technical steps that it's took to get to this point and what that actually portends into the future, this is an accessible, very mature and very funny and kind of alarming read, but it's kind of done with good humor and good language, you know. Yeah, I think we should take his attitude. We should take his attitude. It's like, it's all gonna burn. It's okay. You know,
we're all gonna die.
That's something. Well, fundamentally, that's also the truth, right? So
exactly.
On that note, let's bring some of our guests on. We'll talk about this topic. Let's see. In fact, people should know, Nico, we haven't introduced you right now in terms of the current role you're doing Dreamcraft. Yeah. You are one of these people. So whilst I bring on Catherine and Adriana, why don't you tell the audience quickly who you are and what it is you do for these companies and for the VC?
Yeah, cool. So my name is Nico blier-silvistri. You can easily find me on LinkedIn. I'm a partner at Dreamcraft Venture, taking care of platform. Part of platform, and we won't go too deep into platform, but platform is basically like everything that is not investing. Basically, that's platform within an investment firm. And part of platform, of course, is offering services to your portfolio company. And some of the services are obviously like people and culture linked, and some of the people and culture would be obviously like a recruitment, right? So like what we can do is basically support the portfolio companies in their recruitment, like what we discussed, Hong and I briefly before jumping into the call is. Once a VC makes an investment, almost systematically, it means the organization is going to grow rapidly, aggressively, right? And do they have capacity internally to support that growth, or do they need very, very, very smart and you know, obviously amazingly talented people like the people that you're going to talk with today, which is us. Yay! So that's what, that's what we do.
That's great. And by the way, there's two Adrianas out there, and I've invited them both, so we might get a fifth person joining us. Okay, we have Catherine here as well. Let's go with you, Catherine. Who are you? What is you do?
Hi, Hang. So actually, I prefer to go by Kat, actually. I'm not quite sure I put Catherine in the blurb. So I'm the talent director at Omer's Ventures. So Omer's Ventures are an early stage tech investor based out of Canada, but with a global fund and a global team. And we tend to invest in a little bit of kind of seed stage company, but primarily Series A to C.
Great stuff. Wonderful to see you again. How is your foot, by the way? Are you better?
Yeah, last time, so for anyone else, this is not just a weird out of context question. Last time I saw Hung, I was on crutches and he saw me trying to get up to a clock tower for dinner on crutches up and down stairs. Much better, thank you.
Good to know. There's no need to put explainers in context. Just let people gossip. I think that's totally okay. Right, we have the right Adriana here. Adriana, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but great to see you again. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Nice to see you too, Hung, and thank you for having me. So I'm actually a strategic talent acquisition manager at Cavalry Ventures. Cavalry Ventures is actually investing in pre-seed, seed software companies. So we are actually with them from very, very early stage compared to Kat, who's a bit like earlier in the process. Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. Great to have you on the show, folks. And I'm really pleased to have this conversation. I don't know where it emerged from. It might have emerged from that sort of event that we were at, Adriana, where we had loads of people that were working portfolio side. And it was actually really good to see like dozens of recruiters and TA people working in these types of firms. And it just shows, I think, that investment companies are aware now how important it is to get the people side right for their investment, to really de-risk their investments and make sure that they're actually going to go in the right place. So it's great that that's emerging. Let's do some personal stories though, because I think all of you probably this is your first job in this type of company, I believe, isn't it? So what is different between this and a classic in-house role? In fact, why don't we go with you first, Kat? Because I believe you might actually very recently have joined Omer, right? So only 6 months or so ago.
Yeah.
So maybe very fresh in your mind. Sort of what is different between working on the portfolio side compared to in-house?
Yeah, so I think so my role covers slightly more than just talent acquisition, which is really interesting. So, really my brief is figure out how we can find high-performing teams to invest in and figure out how we can grow the companies we've invested in to being high-performing teams. And so there is definitely some overlap with being an operator in one of those companies. You really have to understand what's coming next and, how to scale an organization to be able to advise. But I think the thing that really makes it different is how you can scale your own impact, because rather than being in the weeds of one company and seeing one perspective and one way of doing things, you're looking across 50 different companies at once that might be at similar stages but have totally different challenges, or companies that have very similar challenges but have approached them in very different ways. So you're being pulled in a lot of different directions. You have a lot of different stakeholders to manage. You don't always have all of the context or all of the information. You're kind of at the liberty of what people will share with you or not, which is down to the level of trust that you've been able to build and the value you've been able to create. And it is a very different role to kind of really need to understand a problem, have high impact very quickly, and then parachute back out again and not getting sucked in to them being reliant on you. I think the kind of closest parallel I can draw is that saying of, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, but teach him how to fish, and you feed him for life. It's really figuring out about how do you enable the companies to kind of solve these problems themselves next time, use your expertise rather than having to solve the problem yourself.
And that's actually a big risk, isn't it? Because I can imagine that, if you might encounter a situation where you think, oh, Christ, I'll just do it myself. But that's like danger, because if you end up doing it yourself, then guess what? The next time that problem emerges, they're going to say, hey, okay, do you remember the last time when you filled those 3 roles? I think you need to do that again. And then, of course, you can't, because you're spread across like a very thin layer of Marmite, aren't you? You spread across the entire portfolio. It's not one company that you have to deal with. So you cannot be operationally involved in the same way as an in-house person. Kat, it's also very interesting you introduced the idea that you also do what seems to be like a bit of deal sourcing, right? So you're also out there spotting and scouting potential in everyone's nodding here. Is that normal for everyone who does this job? Like everyone is a deal sourcer within a VC. Is that correct?
I don't know if like everyone is, but like if you've been an operator, you're connected in the ecosystem, and you will hear stuff. People will come to you. Like now, I have people reaching out that are like not even in the ecosystem, because like, I mean, the market has changed as well. So startup, like it used to be like, hey, we go to you and try to flirt. Now it's the other way around, because the market is dog shit for startups. But I think what Kat said completely right as well. Like sure, there's the pure recruitment side of like, okay, if I need to do it, I will, but I try as much as possible not to only do the recruitment, because you're not helping anyone. But very much during the investment process, I think we're part. I'm assuming. Kat and Adriana, you're part of the investment process. You're part of the analysis. We do the people DD. We deep dive and talk with every founders. We look at people and culture depth. What is set up in the organization? What's not set up in the organization? So that if we actually do the deal, we're ready to kickstart the platform support on, like, because it's not only recruitment. I mean, it actually doesn't make sense to only do recruitment. You would not bring as much value as all the other stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. Everyone's nodding their heads here. So maybe that's something we could say is a big departure from an in-house role. Is that actually there's a lot of non-recruitment work that you need to do, even pre-recruitment work, because you're assessing the potential of the person, not in a recruiting sense, but whether they're going to take the company to where it needs to go.
But I think there is a really strong overlap with that recruitment piece, because if you think about the deal sourcing side, the people that you are interviewing or taking references from, or you're connecting with as potential future candidates for your portfolio companies, may go on to become founders themselves. There's a high potential people. So building those relationships mean that you have a really strong relationship when they start an interesting new venture that you might want to invest in. As well as doing that due diligence piece, which is a bit like you're essentially interviewing the founders, for this partnership between the investment firm and their company, and you're also constantly looking at HR tools, vendors that might be useful for your portfolio companies, and you're seeing interesting new HR tech out there that you might want to invest in as a firm as well. So you have this kind of virtuous cycle of both candidates that are potential founders, or could introduce you to other companies through their network, companies you're talking to, as interesting vendors to your portfolio, and then, the investment team bringing their own deals that you're doing due diligence on.
You keep opening doors that you're inviting us to go down, Kat, and I'm like kind of trying to control this conversation so it goes down in a feasible way to have in 60 minutes. But you've actually said something really interesting, which we'll re-explore. But Adriana, you were about to say something before I interjected. So what were you about to say there?
Yeah, I wanted to say that also, like, sometimes part of it is also to just like interview founders before you decide to invest.
Yes.
So this can also be a very important part of the role. Sometimes, people have their own personalities, I guess. So it's easy to, also give your opinion in terms of like, is it going to be easy to work with this person? What do you feel like? Because, we have been in recruitment for like ages. So you get, I guess, a better feel in terms of like personality and how easy you can work with someone. So that's also something that we usually do. At least I sometimes do that. Not often, but it can happen, yeah.
I think you need to look at an investment process, an easy way, and especially like with us being in recruitment Brainfood, you very much need to look at an investment process like a recruitment process. It is literally the same. There's shitloads of candidates. There's shitloads of startup. Some are applying, some you're hunting, same process, and then it's a filtering. And then just like the perfect candidate doesn't exist, because the perfect candidate for me might not be the perfect candidate for you. It's literally the same for a startup. There's a startup that we might work super well with at Dreamcraft that might not work with the two of you, right? Because of our way of working and everything. So like the critical part of the talent part of a VC is to assess this. This is who we are as an organization. This is how we work. Are those people going to be the right founders? On top of, do we believe they're going to be good founders?
Yeah. And also, can you work with the person? I guess maybe this is something that kind of becomes more of the case over time. But let's say you end up being with the venture capital firm for a long period, and you've seen the growth of several companies and the whole process through. Inevitably, your position and your gravitas internally will increase, and people's trust in you will increase. You'll get to a point where actually the investment team might end up sort of leaning a little bit more on you and saying, "Okay, listen, is this a go or no?" I mean, I can imagine a scenario where there is a veto. I'm not to say I've ever.
There is a veto.
There is.
There is. I mean, like, if they don't trust, if the IC, the investment
Everyone
committee,
is like,
no, but of course, if the investment committee doesn't trust us, the experts in our field are on red flag here. We really, I would not feel comfortable doing this investment because of ABC. You don't call it a veto, but there is a veto.
Yeah.
Right. Leave it. Go ahead, Kat.
I'm not sure it even needs to be a red flag necessarily. Like, that would be too strong. I mean, some of the examples that I've had where, I wouldn't always come out strongly to an investment partner and say, we shouldn't invest, but I'd say, this is my assessment of the founder against, these criteria. And in summary, they're a good leader, but are they an exceptional outlier that is that top, 0.5% that is going to build a multi-billion-dollar company? I don't see it. And on that basis, that can be enough to say, we're not going to invest. They might build a good company, but are they going to build an exceptional outlier, world-changing company? No. So it doesn't need to be a red flag. It can just sometimes be they're just not.
A yellow flag? Would you call it a yellow flag?
Yellow and the flag.
I think what the audience wants is to hear about more red flags, though, Kat. We want to hear about those outright vetoes saying, "Listen, no way, you put money towards this person, I'm out." That kind of story.
I think that's always been a really interesting subject of debate within our firm, at least, which is you look at some of these founders where their behavior, let's say in a personal sense, might be considered red flags. You look at Elon Musk, for example, very controversial character. I'd say, just as many red flags as the Communist Party in some senses, but, he's built exceptional companies. And so you kind of look at this and say, sometimes, what you might consider red flags in, would I want to spend time with this person versus is this person, crazy enough to build a world-changing company? It can be very different criteria.
Do you know what? That's actually a really interesting segue, because we talk about whether this person has the values, etc., all these things we're looking for, but oftentimes you need an outlier that's outside of that framework in order to produce something truly disruptive. And we can anticipate that may involve a number of personality, sort of number of behaviors that also exist outside of normal framework. So, that I guess needs to be factored in somewhat into our decision making, as uncomfortable it might be for HR folks traditionally to want to do, because I think we do tend to lean towards people that are within the framework of what we think is okay. So yeah, that's a controversial one. So okay, let's move the conversation on forward just a little bit more. How do you guys get work? Like, do you just sit there and wait for the inbound, or do you go to companies and say, look, I can see a problem company here. They seem to have bad Glassdoor rating or something, or that CTO position's been open for 7 months. What's going on? How do you how does work come to you?
How do I get out of work is more the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, definitely. At least on my end, because we invest so early, I have to be in touch with the founders very often. So I usually set up recurring calls with them every 2 weeks initially, just to understand, where they are, what are the bottlenecks, what's happening, and just basically keep an eye on them with respect to that and try to guide them towards the next steps, and untangle basically the entire process of whatever they're trying to do. And then, of course, the more mature they become, then I will use this calls until they raise Series A, and then I'm basically off the hook, and then they just reach out ad hoc to me whenever they need anything.
Okay, so that's a very interesting model, Adriana. So essentially, there is your interaction with this business is based on the maturity of the business. super immature, like pre-Series A. They don't even have a business really. They've got a couple of founders, maybe they're building something. So you've got to support all of that infrastructure in whatever way. But you step away once they have raised some money. Presumably that's when they're going to go ahead and hire somebody internally to be a full-time person for them. So there's a sort of handover with that experience. Is that generally how it works, Nico and Kat? Is that the general?
For me, it's so there's some similarities, right? So for me, like the work of platform, and I'm going to call it platform more than recruitment because it's all the other stuff. I think we need to be using the right words. The work of platform like starts pre-investment because it's already part of the the DD, and you're part of the investment analysis and everything, so you can actually prepare all the stuff you're going to put in place. And we do early stage as well, right? We do pre-seed and seed. We can do a bit of seed, but then I build a cadence, right? Where I have like a catch up with the leadership team. I try to have a catch up with the leadership team on a monthly basis, and I don't like to call it coaching, but like sparring on like, okay, where are you? How do you feel? I've been a founders myself, right? Like Hung. I had Platypus for 4 years, so I've been through that washing machine of hope and despair, and I feel great, and I hate myself, and I hate VCs. So I think it's super important to awful. I hate them, like really. I mean, I thought they were vampires before I joined the VC world myself, but I think it's super important to have this. So like sparring with them, look at it as like checking the wellness of the founders, right? And then what Kat was saying, I think it's very much about like, okay, now that we've invested, where are you on your people and culture depth? What needs to be built? What's your recruitment process? What's your onboarding process? How do you do performance management? What do you have in place internally that's going to, again, limit the risk of you failing as an organization? The challenge, I think, especially, I mean, for me, is it's not my company, so I can't decide. It's building some beautiful massage around, I believe this is the right thing you should do. And if you don't listen to me, you're going to fail. But, hey, it's your company, you decide. And that's the difficulty. But build a cadence and then check and support wherever you need to support.
How about you, Kat? Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, would you say that's a general fair characterization? Like you kind of create the structure for the founders so that they, there's a weekly or a monthly or a bi-weekly or something like that. Or is it more like, okay, I'm just here if you need. Here's my number. Call me when you need.
I mean, I think there can be a risk.
I'll be on the beach.
There can be a risk to the latter approach. You might need to start turning the phone off at some point. I think so. So my approach personally has been, when we have a new company joining the portfolio, and you've done that due diligence on where they're at, you have a good idea about that onboarding plan. And, essentially, if the investment team have invested, we see it as a very high potential company. And so they essentially get a blank check in terms of time from you to set them up on the best path for success. So if you set them up right at the start, then on an ongoing basis, they may need less from you, rather than leaving them to their own devices. And then, as Nico's mentioned, they kind of accumulate people debt by, maybe getting some of the things wrong, and you're then trying to undo. So I think that onboarding part where you're starting to build trust, you're showing advice, you're setting them on the right route, sets the relationship going forwards. And my goal, since we add more companies to the portfolio than we exit companies, and therefore, there's always more companies to work with, it's always going to grow. You have to figure out how to scale your impact. So it's how can I build resources, content, toolkits, or frameworks so that companies can self-serve to a sufficient standard without needing help. So you're there as a point of escalation, more rarely if needed. But it frees up your time then to think more proactively rather than reactively. So rather than waiting for a problem that they've tried to solve, haven't been able to solve, and they're kind of escalating to you, if they can solve their own problems with the resources, you can lean in proactively and say, hey, you should start thinking about this thing. I know you're really busy, but if you don't start doing this now at this stage, I can advise you when you get to 100 people or 150 people, this is going to break or this is going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. I've seen it at these other companies. You can be looking across the portfolio for those types of insights to say, with this business model, with this stage of company, with this way of working, these are the milestone points, and you can start to do these preemptive interventions to keep things on track before a company needs to contact you to say this thing has broken. So it's really about being able to tie together the data points you're seeing across the portfolio, across the external marketplace, for CEOs who may not be plugged into people or talent, who've never done this before, who don't know what's coming up, what the path ahead looks like.
We are Gandalf.
Yes.
I guess that's also
What
part
is-
of our position. Sorry to interrupt, Hank. It's
No,
just
go.
to educate a bit, the founders on actually,
Yeah.
what is the process and how to scale your organization in more like a healthier way as well. So I think that's really a huge part of our role as well.
So I could see
Yeah.
in the chat there are a few questions. I think
Yeah.
they're about kind of the difference between later stage and earlier stage, and examples of that. So, if you're a later stage company, Series D, Series E, we have some of those in our portfolio, like kind of WeFox, DuckDuckGo, like really big companies. They have established people teams, chief people officers. They've done this multiple times before. So what they need from us might be the odd leadership candidate introduction. It might be very specific advice or reference on, hey, has anyone used this tool before, or used this exec search firm? But they don't need the kind of guidance that a CEO who is in a Series A company, who's never had to build a performance framework, who doesn't know how to level people in the company or how to set compensation. You're really going to have to walk them through and say, I know you think that at the moment it's great because everyone fits in one room, and so you don't need to give anyone feedback and you don't need to think about performance plans because you just know who your top performers are. You just instinctively know it. But you need to start codifying these things and defining what high performance looks like in your organization and lay that down and codify it. You can't keep it in your head, because by the time it breaks and people start grumbling about their career development or their performance process being an opaque black box where they don't know why they're paid what they're paid or why they're not being promoted, by the time you've got that grumbling in the organization, it's an uphill battle to fix it. So start putting these things in place, and so you're walking them through why do they need these things as well as how to do them.
Very, very good, folks. Just to address some of the questions coming through, none of this is being charged for. These guys do things for free because they're just
You need to say some VCs. Some VCs charge. Some VCs charge. No,
Yeah,
I'm not even kidding.
Charge,
some VCs charge whatever service they get from platform. We're not going to say who, because that's not nice to throw stones at people, but some VCs charge. So like anyone that's a founder of thinking, I think this is something that that they very much should check before you take a VC. You're getting married with somebody, you need to ask all those questions. It's critical.
Okay, let's just reframe this because I think there's confusion in the audience. Basically, the three folks that are on screen here are employees of the VC. So they've been employed by the VC in order to be useful to the investment portfolio that they then supply into. Now, there may be some sort of quasi-internal charging structure, as you mentioned, Nico. That's something you need to read on the T's and C's of you signing in. If you decide to take the money, how does that charging work? But you can also understand why that might exist, because you want to not have and we'll talk about this in a moment, that you don't want to have the internal resources of the VC being kind of substituted in for processes that the company need to grow themselves.
I don't agree. I think charging for that service, when you literally gave money to those people to build a company and be like, hey, actually, I'm going to take back some of that money, makes absolutely no business sense. None whatsoever.
Okay, let's debate about that later. But
that's not a debate. This is sense. That's it.
I need to stop this conversation here because we are charging through this conversation, folks, and we want to make sure that this conversation continues, even though Brainfood does have to come off air in about 20 minutes. Friends, Brainfood Live is the conversation starter. That's the mission of these weekly conversations. It should never be a place where it's a bottleneck ourselves and, we have to come off air so the thing stops. Now is the time basically to make sure that if you want to continue this conversation, you go ahead and do it with everyone else as part of the show. So everyone who's watching here, why don't you take a moment, grab your LinkedIn URL and share it into the chat stream and then connect with everyone who has done likewise. If you're watching this on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or wherever the hell I'm broadcasting this out, why don't you do the same thing onto the comment thread there and make sure you connect with everyone there also. Worst case scenario is everyone walks away with 24 contacts that care about this particular topic, and please do continue this conversation afterward. Also, bunch of questions coming into the chat. You're welcome to put them in there, but there's a high risk that we might miss them simply because the chat stream kind of flies through. Feel free to use the ask question feature at the bottom of the screen. We're going to get to those at the end of the show. Okay, what's the most common request? One thing you can say, like common request, like repetitive, that you can
most
predict.
common one is, which executive search firm should we use for X? Or, can you recommend exec search firm? Or, can we get a reference? It's always kind of exec search firms. And I think, that's obviously, for startups, it's a huge amount of money. It's a really big deal for them. It's a big gamble, the partner they're going to use to find, their next leadership hire, particularly when you've got a CEO who may be handing over the reins to somebody else and bringing another leader into the company for the first time. They don't do it very often, and so I think it's something they do a lot of due diligence on and want to check with several people. I think there's also very mixed quality potentially in the space with exec search partners, and so that's one I get constantly, is who should we use for this search.
A lot of people nodding here. That's very interesting. I didn't anticipate that, but I guess, as you say, Kat, not only is it expensive, but it's obviously possibly, it's also problematic, I would imagine, at some point where, maybe you need to replace an incumbent, or perhaps as all you've carried a missing a resource at that senior level, you need to get it right. So yeah, they're going to lean on some support there. Adriana, I think you were about to say something. Was that right?
Yeah, I think on my end, I was thinking, I guess, agency-related questions, definitely you get that. But what I see as a trend in pre-seed seed stage is that they don't really, or maybe they never really had exposure to hiring and understanding talent. And then they just come and ask you a lot, should I hire Google or Amazon people?
Oh,
and you're like, maybe not that one, not at that stage. Maybe it's not necessarily the right hire, nor you're in the right stage to afford to hire someone from there. So this is a very common one that I usually
You're
get.
spot on. Yeah, spot on. Oh wow, we found this great candidate that worked at Facebook. I'm like, oh no. You're like, please don't. Yeah.
But I think the worst thing is when it's not posed as a question. They're not coming to you with a question. They're just like, we're really excited about this person we found, and you're like, oh no. This is gonna go bad.
That's not gonna happen.
You need to turn into okay, how do I diplomatically tell you that you're completely wrong? I think for me it's a lot. So the executive
difficult to choose, right? I guess there's too many.
yeah. The executive search for me, like I can help, but my argument always, I tell them, is like, okay, how many people are you actually hiring this year? Because does it make more sense for you to start hiring your first in-house? Right, and then I can help you in finding the right in-house and everything. A lot at the moment. It's kind of like a super helicopter view of like, how do I build an employee life cycle from my employer branding to my recruitment process to my onboarding to my offboarding, like, because a lot of the founders, they are inexperienced, like you said, right? They're like Jon Snow. They know nothing, and it's really about holding hand and explaining. And when they've never experienced or never done recruitment, it's super important to train them on what good looks like, what's a good candidate experience. Don't be wowed by, like you just said, by like a weird title in big companies and everything. Don't. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's like genuinely an amazing job, because we get to work on so many different things with so many different people, so many different industries, so many different locations. It's very cool.
It's naturally distributed, isn't it? Like this role is a lot of recruiters, in-house recruiters, have had to shift to remote, having worked, previously in a building. Would it be fair to say that for a portfolio recruiter, given the fact that all of the companies are going to be spread around, you've got to basically get used to a digital first comms. You've always had to do that. There isn't a scenario where you could rely on proximity taking care of relationship building, let's say. Like I think a lot of relationship building back in the single office days, we didn't need to think about it because we're going to turn up every day. And, simply we're going to have the opportunity to rub shoulders with everybody because we're all there. But portfolio recruiter inevitably is going to be more distant from the companies that you're going to be working with. So you need to, I guess, intuitively, or you need to be good at the digital communication side and the relationship building side from remote. Kat's going to disagree, so go ahead and disagree, Kat.
It's a yes bet. So yes, you do have
There's
to
a yes
be
bet.
really strong on the digital communication. But I still think there is no parallel, given that you are a little bit at the mercy of the information that company chooses to share. And they won't always want to give the full picture of maybe all of the problems to the investors. They want to paint a picture that everything's great, your investment's going well, don't worry. And so sometimes there are cues that you can pick up on when you actually go to the team's office and you spend time in their office. You get a better sense of the culture and what is or isn't working, what the morale and kind of feel of it is, and you're not just relying on a touch point of that company telling you, we think this is our problem, or you get a very different sense when you go and spend time in person, and it does wonders for the relationship as well. And I think if you can pick up on those cues and help them address some of those things, they're then more willing to share things digitally going forwards. But you do just have to be aware of gatekeeping.
Let me just underline that point Kat mentioned, very, very important. The relationship that the company has with the investor is not necessarily always that transparent, simply because there's a pressure coming down. There's a sense we've got to keep the investors happy. There's a threat, because there's a hierarchy there. There's no question all of that's true. Therefore, as a person that's working for the investor, you may need to overcome some of those suspicions in the first instance. And it's almost like having an internal consultant, let's say, everyone's on their best behavior, because McKinsey are walking around the office, but because you've got to try and present to the right image so you don't get fired or something.
It can be particularly tricky as well when, for example, if the founder or the leadership team have presented something at a board meeting and that's raised concern, and an investor in the board meeting has asked you to lean in more closely to a company, but they might have an in-house people team or an in-house recruitment team who think they're doing a good job and might not want someone else parachuted in from an investor to start poking around. And you have to be very careful of the sensitivities. There are different stakeholders to manage. Yes, there's leadership at that company, but there may also be in-house teams at that company that you need to work with, and they need to feel that you're a partnership and you're on the same side, and not that they've been kind of snitched on at the board meeting and they're in trouble.
They're going to hate you.
There's a very fine line between...
They're going to hate. No, I think inevitably they're going to have an adversarial position, because they're going to think, who the heck is this guy?
No. I think so. Like if we go back, what Kat is saying is completely right. You cannot beat FaceTime. You will never beat FaceTime. It's super important, especially when it's like you've just done the investment to go and spend time. I'm going to, we just did a deal in Amsterdam. I'm going for 2 days in Amsterdam to spend time with the team and everything. It's critical. You build that rapport and everything, right? And then I try genuinely to go and spend time with them as much as possible. You cannot. And then about the adversary, absolutely not. It's our responsibility as well to build the right relationship with the stakeholders internally, and specifically with the PNC people, if they have PNC people, right? But it's my responsibility as well to highlight to the CEO or the founding team if I think the person is shit. It's important. Because at the end of the day, our job is what is the best for the organization and what can we do to make this organization successful. And sometimes I even have to tell the CEO, you're shit right now and you need to change, because otherwise you're going to kill your company.
I did join a VC during COVID time. So in my first 2 years in the role, I didn't have the chance to actually meet anyone face to face, and it worked out quite well. And I must say that if you build a relationship with the founders, a good one, they will tell you also sometimes when things don't go well. They're very open to you compared to potentially, giving the same information in a board meeting or whatever. So they're much more open to you. So I think you can also build a relationship digitally, especially if you're a VC investing in so many different countries. We're also applying ESG. We're trying to travel the least as possible. I mean, it's let's not travel as much anymore, right? So there's multiple criteria I would take into consideration. We do organize a founder summit for the founders every year. We do have a portfolio day for everyone to meet in person as well, and then we meet with the companies that are based in Berlin more often, and with the other ones maybe once in a while. But I personally don't really meet the ones that are outside Berlin as much, so the relationship is still quite good on my end.
Yeah, and then inevitably we have to accept that there's going to be variance of relationship throughout the portfolio, right? I mean, there's a proximity thing. There's also a requirement whether they need you, you need them. We talked about whether they're super mature or may already have a very strong existing team, for instance. So we shouldn't necessarily approach it as if everyone needs to have the standardized same experience. We have to moderate that according to the needs of that particular organization. There was a comment, and we'll go to questions in a second. There was a comment earlier in the thread that I spotted, and I don't know who mentioned it, but I thought it was really interesting about the level of seniority that you need to be in order to play the role of a portfolio recruiter in VC, particularly given some of the responsibilities that you've been having, like dealing with C-level, auditing or at least analyzing the performance of other recruitment teams. Would it be fair to say that basically you can't be a junior person doing this role? Or if you were doing it as a junior person, then essentially it's going to be like more or less just deployed as a recruiter, a normal recruiter for a surge bit of hiring or whatnot?
I mean, look, I'm 27, right? I had to, sorry. No, I'm 43, and I think the background, like I was an operator at Unity, at Trustpilot, at Revolut, chief people officer at Revolut. So I think for the level that we have, the three of us, you need to have seen a lot of shit. You've experienced growth. You've been through an operator in those companies that have grown because you've seen the circus, and therefore, if you've seen the circus, you can highlight the circus, right? Because you've seen. I think a junior recruiter, then it would be a very, very specific part of like, okay, we're going to use you as an internal headhunter, basically, and that's it. And then maybe you can learn more. But I would strongly suggest that you need to build experience as an operator in a company, not as a headhunter. That's my and then more than just recruitment.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nico. I think
my point of view.
I think you definitely need to have some experience in house. I mean, I also, have been with 5 different companies, all different stage, different challenges, and that's where you also like kind of see the mistakes or whatever is burning at a different stage, and you're just trying to advise the founders not to, go through that as much as possible. But I would say you need to have exposure. It's not necessarily about years of experience, but rather exposure to different environments and different type of companies at different stage. That's my opinion. You're muted, Kat.
Have I done that? At some point, you get through a video call without like, you're on mute. I thought we're past that post-COVID. Sorry, I was just saying I completely agree. I think it's less about years of experience. I think anyone who's worked in a startup knows it can be like dog years, where like 1 year can feel like 7 years, and it very much depends on the stages of growth that company has gone through. So I would look at it more as almost like a bingo card. If you were to curate, if you had a goal of doing this kind of role, there's like a bingo card you might want to tick off of, have I seen internationalization? Have I seen, headcount reduction? Have I seen rapid headcount growth where you've needed to, double the size of the teams? Have I seen, seed, Series A, Series B? Have I seen what's needed at those different stages of company growth? But, if you know that you're really excited by early stage and building and you just want to focus on pre-seed or seed, there are funds, that just work with that area, and therefore you don't need experience of seeing companies reaching 1,000 people in headcount if that's not the kind of VC firm you want to work for. But if you're looking at a broader firm, then I think it's worth just mapping out what are those milestones in company growth and making sure you've seen them a couple of times, not just I've done this one thing once and I survived it, and therefore that's enough to tell someone else how to do it. I think you need to have lived it and relived it and learned from it and figured out where you've gone wrong the first time that you did it, so that you could advise someone else the next time around.
And therefore all this is super important, because then when you talk with the founders and everything, first of all you have credibility because they see your that's it, like but something that a sentence I use a lot when they're like, okay, but what should we do now? Like, that's the problem. I often tell them, like, look, I might not have the perfect solution, because they might not be, but I've seen a lot of the stuff we shouldn't do. And that's already helping them a lot, because I failed a lot in a lot of companies, and I've been successful as well in lots of companies, but you cannot have the perfect answer because every startup is going to be different founder, different everything, right? But it's super, I think, Kat, you're spot on. Like, having it done only once, a hyper growth, it's not going to be enough because you only learn one recipe, right? But it's a great job.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the questions real quick, folks. We've got 8 of them. We have to just blast through them, so we won't be able to go round. I'll just nominate a person to do the answering, okay? So let's go here. We've got Jean-Joseph. We're saying, okay, what transferable skills from agency recruiter already working with the startup? What is the ideal background skills, HR recruiting? Okay, I think what Jean-Joseph is saying, what is the ideal background for a person doing a portfolio recruiter role? We've kind of already talked about that. It's someone who's already worked in a startup or worked in several startups and seen it through that journey. So I hope that's going to be satisfactory answer, Jean-Joseph. Let's go for Ben Blundell. He's saying, do you have preferred staffing vendors who provide to the fund, or do you provide a fund for the list of vendors to use? Kat, why don't you answer this? Do you have like a pet agency? Tell us about that.
Pet agency is a bit strong. I'd say what we have, I have a directory that I would point people towards of, these are the exec search firms for these types of roles in these types of locations. There are definitely HR tech vendors that when we really like something and we see it can add value, we want to save our companies the time of going and doing the same research like 50 times over and coming up with the same answer. So, we tend to say, this is a company we really recommend. Here's the pros and cons of this. We try to avoid giving a single option. Unless there is like a clear industry winner. I'm going to try to avoid naming any names here, but sometimes there is one that's a standout that you might say, guys, if you're not using this one.
Mute Nico in advance. Give me a sec. Let me just put him on mute. There we go. Right. Yeah. Continue, Kat. Go ahead.
You'll try and give a couple of options to your companies and summarize, this is what it would be good for, and this is what it's not good for. So that at the end of the day, they're making their own decisions on which vendors they use, but you can save them the research and the legwork, and you can, reference these companies, you can reference staffing partners or tools to make sure that, you use your network to help out a company that might not have anyone else who's used it before.
Cool. And Ben's asked the second question, which is obviously he's led me into the trap. How do I get on that list, Kat? How does he do that? Is it brown envelope time? Like how does he get there?
Well, so I think I've shared my LinkedIn in the chat. I'm always keen to chat with people and demo, but I'm a very tough customer, so be prepared, happy to demo, always keen to talk to companies that really think that they could do something great for our portfolio. So connect with me on LinkedIn. We can take it from there.
There you go, Ben. Make sure your ego is in sort of lockup in storage, and then get in contact with Kat. Okay. Okay. What kind of background? We've answered that. If you're a recruitment agency, our best way to approach VC portfolio, again, just connect with people and say, hey, we do this, and then chance your arm. It's totally okay. Okay. We've got Caleb. He's saying, as a portfolio recruiter, what are some unique challenges you face in employer branding when dealing with multiple brands? That's a huge question. We have to go real quick. Let's go to you, Adriana, for this one. Any thoughts on answering this?
Okay, so most of my companies don't really have an employer brand yet, not even close to that, I guess. So it's just rather, doing basics on start working on it and just like educating them on the importance of actually building an employer brand. So that's on my end. I guess it's a bit different for Kat for like a bit of a later stage.
No, I think that's totally okay. It also tells you a little bit about the portfolio responsibility. Probably isn't to build an independent employer brand for these companies. You've simply got to give them some guidance as to how they may be able to express that brand or express their culture as a business, because they're obviously all independent organizations out there. Okay, let's leave with the final 2 questions. And this will go all the way around. So what's the hard part about the job, guys? Like, what's one thing where you think, God damn, this portfolio stuff, this is tough. Nico, very quickly, we'll go around, but let's go you to start off with.
So again, like I said it, I think it's the 3rd time. I really love the job. I'm really enjoying it because I can feel that I used the last 10 years of experience of startup and everything. So I'm truly enjoying it. I think that the part that's we've had, it's a tough market. We know this, and we've had to help founders close their company. That's obviously shit. It's really rough, right? And then you turn. Like I'm trying to build something around like supporting the founder on the wellness because you're losing your dream. As a founder, I've closed my company. It's a nightmare, and so how to make sure that they're okay with this. Basically, it's as much emotional support as logistic support on closing the business.
Yeah, really good answer. Basically, it's an inevitable part of working for portfolio. There's going to be a load of companies that don't make it, or they have
8
to
out
make
of
big
10.
changes. Yeah, 8 out of 10. Okay, so you then basically need to be to be part of that is emotionally difficult, but it's got to be part of that journey. Okay, how about you, Kat? What's one thing that's bad about this?
Oh, it's hard to pick a bad thing. Similar to Nico, like I love this job. I wish I knew before this was a job I could do. You know, it feels like a privilege to be able to work with some of these exceptional companies. I think the hard thing is maybe staying impartial and not getting sucked in. I think it's very easy to almost end up with favorites. And I think someone made the point earlier of how do you stay impartial? And, when you've got candidates, for example, you might have 4 companies in your portfolio all looking for a VP of marketing and, one great VP marketing person. And you're like, do I have a favorite company that I, give first dibs to this? You have to stay impartial. There might be a company doing something really unsexy in managing shipping container timings, for example, and they built some SaaS for that. Maybe it doesn't personally excite you compared to something else that you personally use, but you have to stay impartial across the companies and look at how do you give all these companies the best chance of success and what's going to be best for the organization and best for the firm ultimately. So it can just be hard to remove yourself a little bit from favorites.
Yeah, and that's a big part of that challenge of staying elevated above the operational stuff, because you can get deeply involved in the wrong way. Okay, Adriana, how about you? What's the one thing that is actually not great about being a portfolio recruiter? We're not talking specifically about your jobs here, by the way, folks. It's like the nature of the job.
Yeah. So I think when you transition to this position, you just have to get used with the idea that you don't do the work, you're not hands-on anymore, which can be tough in your first couple of months in this position, as you have to learn to guide them. And, the decision is no longer in your hand. They have to build their own company. But I mean, other than that, is really cool because you kind of like have the chance to be part of the entire development journey of the company, which is challenging, but in the same time can be super rewarding to see that they actually succeed. So it's cool. I recommend everyone to apply for a job like ours.
There we go. Well, that's fantastic. We have to close the conversation here. I think we could continue to go on, but I'm really pleased to have had this conversation. I think it's the first time in Brainfood Live where we've actually focused on this topic. I'd love to do another one about this because there's lots more to talk about, I feel. So I hope you've enjoyed it. We're over time though, folks, so we've got to say goodbye to our wonderful guests. Adriana, wonderful to see you. I'm in Berlin, by the way, in next month, so we'll have to catch up. And Kat, great to see you as well. I hope you have a very good weekend. Nico, wonderful to see you also. Good to see you. I'll say goodbye to everyone here. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I think that's it. Enjoy your weekend, Nico.
You too.
See you later, man.
Ciao.
Okay, that's it, folks. We're out. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you have enjoyed this type of conversation, you can do a number of things. You can follow the channel on Crowdcast. That's basically where we do the hosting the live stream. You can follow my personal LinkedIn profile if you're watching it here. And that's also where we broadcast the show. Next week, we're going to be back with a must attend. It is how Google AI search is going to change recruitment marketing. Recruitment marketing, I don't think people are aware of this. Google AI search, their new way of doing it, is going to dominate the on-screen real estate with generated content. So think about what Google has traditionally done throughout its entire lifespan is to retrieve content and present you a list of blue links. Google AI search is not going to do that anymore, or at least it's not going to be above the fold. What it's going to be is going to be generated content first. What is that going to do for SEO? What is that going to do for web traffic? What is that going to do for recruitment advertising? What is it going to do for employer brand? It's going to be huge. You have to attend this, folks, if you're in the game of recruiting, particularly if you're doing recruitment marketing or employer branding. Make sure you register for next week. It's already up there. 350 people already signed up. Okay, that's about it. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you next week.